Welcome to another live stream. I'm gonna let everybody know that the stream is getting ready to start. And okay, welcome to the live again. Well, I'm just gonna let everybody know that the live stream is getting started, and we're going to be talking about the subject I talked about last week, which was writing strong heroines, and we're also going to talk about the Captain Marvel's movies failed marketing campaign. Now, when it comes down to the writing of strong heroines, this is something I have a lot of experience in, and it's something I came from women's fiction and writing romances because that's what I did before I started writing fantasy books like the Isis series and the Esteem series. I started out writing romances like the Cassandra Cookbook and screenplays like All About Marilyn, which featured a strong heroine, and books like The Thetas, which featured strong heroines. And I also wrote books like the Spinsterella trilogy as well. So I have a strong background in writing strong heroines. And it's something that when it comes down to comic book companies like Marvel, they seem to have a hard time understanding how to make a heroine appealing to audiences of both men and women. Because when it comes down to companies like Marvel, usually when they write strong heroines, one of the big problems that they do these days is they try to make the heroines way too masculine, and that's what usually winds up turning off the audiences of both men and women. Because when it comes down to audiences, they want to see women who are strong, but they don't want to see a woman being strong like a man. They want to see a woman being strong like a woman, and they want to see a woman being appealing from a perspective that makes her both attractive to both men and women. And one of the things I learned from writing romance novels like the Cassandra Cookbook and women's fiction like The Thetas and All About Marilyn, and books like the Spinsterella trilogy, was I learned how to write heroines who had the strength, but they were internally strong. And this is one of the big problems that really is that comic writers have, is that they focus on trying to make a heroine physically strong like the guys, but then they don't focus on any of the internal character traits that would make the character attractive to readers. And when it comes down to readers, what they want in a heroine is a character who they could consider to be a best friend for the girls, and for the guys want to see a woman who has character traits that they see in a girlfriend or they would see in their wife. And that's what guys want to see in a heroine. But when it comes down to comics, they don't give you that type of heroine. Again, they just sit there and they'll give you a heroine who is acting like a man, like Captain Marvel has been acting, and someone who goes out of their way to attack other people. And that doesn't make that character endearing to the reader, because what comic publishers have to understand is that when you're writing a heroine, you have to write this character in a way that is attractive to, again, both men and women. And the reason why you want to do that is because when you have audiences, they're going to want to spend time with that character. They're going to want to spend their time with this character, as I stated before in the previous live stream. And you have to give them a reason to want to spend time with this character and want to continue spending their money on this character. And this is a big problem that I see with a lot of comic companies, especially here in the West, especially in America, that they often make these characters and they don't give you a reason to want to spend time with this person or want to have any sort of relationship with this person. And I could see an example of that in the Marvel series, Captain Marvel. Now, I read the first issue of Captain Marvel, and it was a book that was literally shouting at people and telling them why Captain Marvel was strong. And they were talking about all of her physical attributes, but then they didn't give us anything as related to her internal character to make us care about her. And then as I read the second issue, I saw more of this stuff where they're pushing this feminist agenda at us, where they're trying to show us how these women are trying to be strong like a man, but it doesn't make that character attractive to the audience to show us what makes her appealing or attractive as a woman. So that's where I see the big problem with the Captain Marvel character. And the character comes across as just so abrasive that she literally winds up turning you off when you see her. And that's something that's alienated a lot of people as related to her new movie. And hold on one second, I have to let people know on Twitter what's going on. And I'm letting people on Facebook know the live stream is going on. And it's the way she comes across. It just turns you completely off because the way the character is written, the way the character is designed, she just comes across as trying to show up the guys, and she comes across as really arrogant and egotistical. And that's not something you want in a heroine when you're trying to sell the customers, because heroines have the hardest time selling in the comic book marketplace. And one of the things that hurts the Captain Marvel character is that she goes out here and she's shouting at the reader instead of trying to let the readers get to know her. What's up, Edek? What's up, Devon Williams? What's up, Omayo? I'm talking about this writing strong heroines, and I'm talking about what they're doing wrong with this Captain Marvel character, this Carol Danvers version. And what she is doing is not giving us a reason to buy her comic or go out and watch her movie, because she is not a friend to the reader in the comics, and she's less of a friend to the reader in the movie. Now, from my experience as a writer of women's fiction, romance, and fantasy series like the ISIS series and the Esteem series, I have learned how to write heroines in a way to make them appealing to the reader and make them attractive to the reader. And one of the things you want to do when you're writing a heroine is making them relatable to both men and women by, again, showing us a woman who can be a friend to the reader and be someone we want to have a relationship with. For the girls, they want a best friend who they can see, someone they can have a relationship with, where they can hang out with. And for the guys, they want that woman they want to go out with on a date, or they want to go out and they see themselves possibly seeing as their wife. So that's what they want to see in a heroine, and that's what's going to bring the readers into the story. But when it comes down to many comic companies, they're so focused on the superpower that they're not focused on developing the heroine as a person. Now, when I go out here and I do characters like Isis, I came up with the whole concept of the goddess next door. And the reason why I came up with the goddess next door concept was because I wanted to show how Isis was a friend to the reader and how, like a girl next door, you could always count on her to help you out. And the same thing with the Esteem character. I wanted to do this devilish diva in the beginning where she was this woman she had these demonic powers, but she was a bit of a diva when she went out here to help people. And she was a bit more fun and vivacious. And she was a friend to people when in any type of situation she wound up in and tried to help people do the right thing. And after she lost her demonic powers in Esteem Ascension, she's still a friend to people and she's still a heroine out here with her new powers. But again, she's still someone you want to have fun with and spend time with. And that's something that's very important when you're writing a heroine, is having that person want to be somebody you want to spend time with. Because when people are spending their money on your books, they want to have a reason to come spend time with you. And I remember back in the day when I used to buy comics, I used to look forward to the Friday when the new comics were coming to the newsstand. I used to get really excited when those new comics were coming there because I used to look forward to spending time with those heroes and being able to come into their adventures. And it all goes back to the relationship that the reader is having with the character, because the character is their friend and they want to spend time with that friend. So when it comes down to Captain Marvel, she does not come across as a friend. And instead of her coming across as a friend, she reminds you a lot more of that abrasive, pink-haired woman in the white suit who I've seen in many of those YouTube videos, that feminist who was shouting at people. And when you see somebody like that, what they do is they make you defensive. And instead of you wanting to be open to that person and wanting to engage them, what you want to do is wind up disengaging them. So when I look at your Captain Marvel, she's not someone who gives you a reason to buy her comic. And that's why her comic has been struggling for the last 4 or 5 years. And that's why I believe the movie is going to struggle, because when I look at the story for the film, it's very bland, it's very generic. And then you have Brie Larson coming in, and Brie Larson is just a very abrasive person. She's a very hostile person. She's sitting here attacking the audience. And if you attack the audience, then how are they going to have a reason to buy the movie ticket? Now, as it relates to the MCU was primarily built by men. It was primarily supported by men, and it was men who went out in large numbers to go out and buy the tickets for almost 10 years worth of movies. And then you have Brie Larson coming in and talking about how she doesn't want any white men at her press conference. And that's a real insult and slap in the face to all of those men who supported this more MCU franchise over the last 10 years. Now, it was the men who built up the MCU, and she's telling them not to come and go see to her press conference, which is basically throwing a middle finger up at all those men who would have spent money to go see her movie. And that's not an example of a strong woman. That's an example of a very insecure woman, and the example of a very weak woman who would go out here and attack the very same men who elevated her to a high position. Because your feminists like Brie Larson What they don't understand is that it's men who go out of their way to elevate women to a higher position in society. And when it comes down to white women like Brie Larson, they have been elevated to a high position by this group of white men. And the only reason why she is starring in that movie is because men have invested their money in making this film. Men have invested their time in making this movie, and men invested their resources in putting this film together in the hopes of making a film with a heroine in the lead. So if it wasn't for those men doing that, there wouldn't be a film. And it just shows how spoiled your Brie Larson is, because she's sitting there talking about how she's making this film to make a feminist statement. But the great irony is, if it wasn't for all those men in Hollywood, there wouldn't be a Captain Marvel movie made at all. And from her position, is what comes across to me as really arrogant, is her sitting there talking about how great she is, when, again, you are the most privileged woman in society, and you want to talk about how oppressed you are. I mean, I sit there, I say to myself, how are you oppressed when you, a white woman, are being elevated to the highest stage in society? You are starring in $100 million movie, and you have been paid $10 million to star in this film. Where's the so-called oppression when you are benefiting from the greatest privilege in this society? So I sit there and I look at your Brie Larson and I look at her behavior, and it shows how little respect she has for the audience overall. So again, why would people want to spend money on this film? And I look at the woke marketing that's going on as related to this movie, and it just is an insult to all those comic fans out there who took their time and spent their money to support the MCU. Because again, it was men who built up the MCU, and it was male fans who went out here and spent all their money to make these films, billion-dollar films. And here she is going to come in here and tell those male fans that they shouldn't go see her movie. I mean, this is basically, like people have been saying, Ghostbusters 2016 all over again. And I look at the marketing, and it's a complete failure from the jump, because when I look at the way I market heroines, that's not what I would do if I was to make an ISIS movie or an Eastie movie, or even a movie out of a screenplay like All About Marilyn, which is one of my first screenplays, or The Thetas. I'm not going to go out here and attack the men who are primarily going to spend the money, because I know when I'm doing fantasy stories like ISIS and Eastie, my core audience is primarily going to be men. And even for books like the books in the Spinsterella trilogy, a good chunk of my audience is men. It's men who are buying these books. So why would I want to insult them by saying things bad about them? And even if it was women, I wouldn't want to say anything bad about them. I would want to be able to build a bridge, and that's what I'm trying to do now with the SJS Direct imprint, is build that bridge and form that relationship, because I'm going to need everybody to come in if I hope to have a successful product. But when I look at your Brie Larson and I look at the way she is going about working on marketing this film, she just shows she has no understanding of what it means to go out here and try to build up momentum to get people excited about this movie. And it's hard to get excited about this movie because, one, the trailers were very weak, and then the later one, the Super Bowl ad, was again extremely arrogant. Because I look at that Super Bowl trailer, that was one of the most insulting trailers I ever saw. She's talking about how she's going to do things better than the guys. And that's not how you win over customers, by telling them you're going to be better than them, and then sit there and talk about how you're going to be smarter than they are, more superior to them. That's not how you win over customers. And again, that does not show us an example of strength. It does not show us an example of a strong woman. Now, when it comes down to what I write, I usually, when I try to write strong heroines, again, I focus on those traits that I believe that would be, again, attractive to both men and women, the traits that would show us how this woman could be a friend to the reader, and those traits that show men that this woman could be someone who has character traits that they would want in their girlfriend or their wives, because they would want to spend time. What's up, Mike? They would want to spend time with that person, because when you are buying a, as I said before in the previous live stream, when you're spending money on a 200, 300 page book, people want to spend time with this person. They're going to be spending a long time with that person. So you have to make that person as appealing and attractive as possible. And you have to make them very attractive, especially when you want to bring them back for two more 250 or 300 page books. Because if you don't make them attractive, then they're only going to buy maybe one book, and then after that, they may not buy anymore. And this is the big problem that your Marvel and your DC and many comic companies, they don't understand, is that you are driving away people by creating this character, and you want to say that it's strength. But again, strength is something that, when it relates to heroines, comes from their internal character traits. And it's those internal character traits where they show strength of character that really make that character attractive. And that was something that I talked about in the novel Spellbound, when I was talking about this Matilda Crowley character, where the story was about this introverted girl who wanted to try to find her voice so that she could express herself in this high school where she was being bullied and harassed for just being biracial. And then as she started to become a part of the goth subculture, she adopts this Black Widow identity where she starts to find her voice, and she starts to become the person that she wants to become, and she starts to find the confidence to be the woman that she wants to be. So in this story, we saw the character learning building the internal strength of character to become the person she wanted to become as part of the character transformation arc. And that's something that we're not seeing as related to these heroines that companies like Marvel are trying to push. They want to push this so-called strong woman, and they want to make her strong at the expense of the men, and they want to make her so strong that she goes out of her way to be hostile, abrasive, and tries to emasculate men, instead of trying to find ways to be supportive of men and show how she's going to be a partner that can support them. Because I usually, when I think of heroines, again, what makes a strong woman to a man is someone who shows that how she's going to contribute as a helpmeet and a support to the men. And that's something I tried to show in the two Isis series books, Isis Bride of Dracula and Isis Escape from Transylvania. Now, in those two books, let me see if I can pick them up. Oh, they're right here. In these two books, we see how Isis becomes a strong heroine, because in the first book, Bride of Dracula, she's telling John Haynes that because he has no powers, oh, you shouldn't be fighting these supernatural menaces. And then when Dracula gets the one up on her, what happens is she has to swallow her pride after John overcomes her with no powers whatsoever and outsmarts her, and then learn how to work with that man towards defeating Dracula. So in this story, Isis had to learn some humility, and that's something that a strong woman would do, is suck it up and swallow her pride, and then realize that she has to work with a man towards a situation. And then in Escape from Transylvania, Isis and John have to work together again to overcome the horde of vampires. And in this story, we learn something about the intangible of women and respect and relationships. Now, when it comes down to relationships between men and women, we don't get to see that intangible in the comics in many cases because they're trying to push this so-called idea of a strong woman, but they're not thinking about the whole idea of showing us, I'm sorry, just got to get my water, the whole concept of respect. And the concept of respect is very important when you're writing a story featuring a heroine and she's interacting with male characters, because that's something that men want to see in a woman. When it comes down to women, they want someone they will respect and see as someone they can look at and see on the same level as being respected. And that's something that is earned for men. You earn respect. Yeah, that is an Omega Red, Devin, in the back. It's Marvel Legends Omega Red. It's another gift from a family member. But respect is something that men want to see in a woman. And respect is earned by women having the internal strength of character to sometimes, in some cases, submit to male authority, and in other cases, showing respect by understanding that sometimes it's better if the man takes the lead, or if the man is making efforts to protect you, then you let that man make an effort to protect you. And I show, those intangibles in Isis Bride of Dracula, and I show them in Isis Escape from Transylvania. I try to show how the Isis character is strong, but she's not trying to be physically stronger than a man or physically better than a man. She wants to show the internal strength of character to say, okay, I got beat by Dracula, and now I'm going to listen to John Haynes and see what he can do to beat this vampire lord. And in this story, she's talking about earning John Haynes' respect after being humbled by Dracula. So in both of those stories, we see a model for showing you strong women, and they're showing their strength, again, by the internal character traits that they have, because that's something we're not seeing in comics. Instead, they want to try to push this whole idea of a woman being like a man, but men don't want to see a woman being a competitor to them. And this is something I talked about in one of my nonfiction books, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single, is that because a lot of Black women go out here and they want to be a competitor to a man, that's what turns a lot of guys off. And that's what I believe turns off a lot of readers as related to many of what they call these SJW comics like Captain Marvel, Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, and books like Squirrel Girl and Unstoppable Wasp, is that they make these women who want to compete with the man. And if you've got a woman who wants to compete with you, like I see many Black women try to do with Black men, that's something that winds up turning you away as a man, because a man does not want to deal with a woman who is trying to fight him at every turn. And no man wants to sit down and spend $3.99, $4.99 reading a story about a woman who wants to try to find ways to compete with him. I'm going to read. So Marvel Goku and MGTOW says that Marvel Studios Captain Marvel is based on the Kelly Sue DeConnick run. Oh, that's a mistake. That was a mistake right there, because Kelly Sue DeConnick, as I've seen from reading some of her comics, not a very good writer. Rapper 1000 Wonder Woman is a good, strong character. And that's one of the things that made the Wonder Woman movie very successful, was we saw how she was working with the men and how she was respecting her peers. Now, when I think about Wonder Woman, I saw that in the theater. One of the things that was surprising is a lot of feminists want to praise that movie, but that movie was very traditional. When I look at the Wonder Woman they put on screen, she was a very traditional woman. I mean, she was submitting to Steve Trevor's authority. She was respecting the men and she worked with the men alongside them. And it's very, very different from what the way they've presented Captain Marvel. The way they have presented Captain Marvel, that wasn't what I saw in Wonder Woman. In Wonder Woman, we saw her working with the Scottish guy and the Native American, and they all worked together in many situations towards completing the mission. And she always saw herself as a woman who supported the men, and she had nothing but respect for those men. And that's why those men learned to respect her throughout the movie. And that's something that we did not see with this Captain Marvel, they've started from day one just showing us how this woman just is so abrasive. She's just the one with all the power. She's going to show how she's better than the guys. And when you're trying to sell a movie to an audience or even a book like I do, you don't want to do that, because that's not a example of the type of strength that will sell thousands of books or even hundreds of millions of dollars in movie tickets. When you have a woman who is acting like that, that's again reminding people of that colored-haired feminist in the white suit who was screaming at people. And when you look at that female on the video, would you want to spend money on that woman? Would you want to spend time with that woman? And the answer to that is emphatically no, because this person is just a turnoff to be around. And this is why something that many people at Marvel they don't seem to understand regarding marketing a heroine. They're so eager to market a heroine, but what they don't understand is if you write a heroine in a way that winds up alienating people and putting the most unattractive traits on her, you're not going to sell a lot of stories featuring that heroine, and you're not going to sell a lot of copies of books featuring that heroine, nor are you going to sell a lot of movie tickets featuring that heroine, because that person is not somebody anyone wants to spend time with. Now, back when I was doing my research for the Spinsterella trilogy, I picked up one of DC's Minx books, and while I loved the art from Josh Howard in this clubbing book, the character here was, again, another one of these attempts to push this idea of a strong heroine, but because she was just so narcissistic and abrasive, I couldn't get into this story, and it just turned me completely off because the character was just so obnoxious and self-centered. So I had no reason to think about buying any more Minx books, because I remember as I did research about the Minx line, this was a line that was supposed to be a fusion of manga and comic books, and it was supposed to meant to appeal to girls, but the whole line failed within a year. And one of the reasons why, I believe, is because the stories here, just like many of the books like Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, and Squirrel Girl and Unstoppable Wasp, they featured women who were unattractive to the reader. And they were unattractive, again, because they had internal character traits that no one could find appealing. I mean, this character, Lottie, was so selfish and narcissistic that it just didn't give me a reason to want to go and continue reading this book after a couple of pages. I mean, I just struggled to finish it because I wanted to learn more about the goth subculture, but they didn't really even put that much in there about the goth subculture. They just had like a goth surface on there, but they didn't dig deep into the subculture the way anybody who knows the subculture would dig deep. And I had to dig deep for the Spinsterella trilogy. I wanted to dig deep because I wanted to give readers who were new to the scene a little understanding about it, and I wanted to give Baby Bats a little bit of an understanding about it, and I wanted to give casual readers a bit of an understanding about the scene. So that's one of the reasons I didn't find much help from that book. I thought it would have helped, but it was clear to me the writers didn't do their research on it. But the whole idea of strong heroine, it just wasn't there. And it was just, we want to put a woman in a place, but the whole thing is you're not putting a relatable woman in a place. And I saw that same type of marketing done back when I was reading Superhero Women by Stan Lee. I saw it with Claws of the Cat. That was a comic that was supposed to be geared towards pushing the so-called strong woman narrative, but the book was just so flat and one-dimensional. And the character of Greer Grant at the time, or Greer Nelson, she just wasn't relatable at all. I saw where they were trying to turn her into a Peter Parker type character, but the big problem was they didn't really give her any sort of real challenge or obstacle. And this is another problem that a lot of people make when they're writing heroines, is that they throw softball challenges at these so-called strong heroines, and that's what makes them into paper tigers. Now, when I go out of my way to write heroines, I throw heavyweight challenges in front of them, and that's whether it be either an ISIS series book or an E-Steam series book or even a novel like Spellbound. I will make an effort to throw hard, heavy balls at these women, because in order for us to see this heroine is strong, we have to see obstacles placed in front of them that they have to overcome. And it's the way they overcome those challenges that makes the character relatable to the reader. And it also makes us in the character endear to us and makes us see this character's hero's journey. So that's not something we're seeing, because as I've seen for over the years, every time they do a story featuring a heroine, they throw softball challenges at them. And those softball challenges, they don't really show us how this hero managed to find a solution to either the problem in their personal lives or the problems that they face in their lives as a heroine. And that's not something that's going to, again, give you a reason to go out here and buy this character's adventures on the regular. You want to see a character who can deal with problems in their personal lives, and you want to see a heroine who can overcome challenges in their life as a hero, whether it be finding a creative solution to defeat the bad guy or finding a creative solution to dealing with the problems in their personal life. That's what people want to see in a strong heroine, and that's what they want to see in a story featuring a strong heroine, that strength of character to persevere in the face of adversity, and real challenges that they can show how they face that adversity and overcome in the face of that adversity. But we oftentimes get these writers who, again, they get emotionally attached, as I see it, because I see it a lot when guys write heroines, is that they get emotionally attached to the character. And that's why they lob softball challenges at the character. And that's why they don't really, because they don't want to see the character get hurt by the challenges. Again, it goes back to some of the basic principles of men, is that when it comes down to a lot of men, they want to protect women. But when you have a heroine, you can't protect a heroine, because you're trying to convey a message to the reader about overcoming challenges and overcoming adversity. So that's a big problem with heroines. And I'm reading what Mike Ike is saying, and that he says that the problem with female heroes is that most of the time they are written with no flaws, and that's a huge problem with heroines. That's something I noticed over the years with heroines, is, again, they are written with next to no flaws. And when I go out here and I write heroines, one of the first things I do is put a lot of flaws on those characters. Now, I remember when I was creating E-Steam, she was a character, yes, she's very attractive on the outside, but on the inside, she has a lot of flaws. She's dealing with a lot of daddy issues. She's dealing with a lot of things as related to being awkward, and she's dealing with a lot of struggles as related to her navigating the world of humans and dealing with struggles with her humanity. So she's trying to get used to being human again, after living in the world of demons. So that was a big struggle for her. And Temptation of John Haynes was her embracing her humanity again, because she had been hurt when her father had rejected her adopted father Osiris had rejected her. And because she loved John Haynes so much, she decided to embrace her humanity again. And that was a real struggle for that character because of the flaws that she had. Now, with the Isis character, she struggles with a whole bunch of flaws. And one, that she's a tomboy, and that she tends to relate a little bit more to males than females. So she struggles with women. And then she also is a very awkward girl who's struggling with feelings of inadequacy, because she's this human being who walks among gods and is the descendant of gods, and she is more comfortable with human beings than she is with gods. So she struggles with being a goddess because she is more comfortable with being human, and she feels inadequate about certain things. So she's struggling with stuff, and it makes her feel awkward and inadequate. And these are things that girls struggle with all throughout their life, and that they're always being told that they have to be perfect, but it's the flaws that actually are the things that make them more beautiful. So that's something that I wrote when I was writing Isis and Esteem's stories, is dealing with those internal flaws. And when I did Matilda Crowley's character, she was dealing in Spellbound. She was an introvert, and I was dealing with the character's struggles with shyness and her feelings of inadequacy, because she felt like she couldn't speak, and she was struggling with that, and she was struggling to find her voice, and she was struggling to let people know who she was as a person. So with the Matilda Crowley character, I was showing how introverts deal with things, and I did that over 3 books: Spellbound, Legendary Mad Matilda, and Spinsterella, and all 3 of them deal with different aspects of not only the goth subculture, but it also deals with the issue of being shy and being introverted, because a lot of people who are in the goth scene, they struggle with being introverts, and they struggle with feeling different things as related to being an introvert. So that was something I wanted to explore, and it's those flaws that make those characters very relatable to the reader, and it makes them attractive to the reader because they see parts of themselves in the character. And when people start to see parts of themselves in the character, that's going to lead to you actually getting more sales, because when people see themselves in the character, they have another reason to go out here and spend money on a character who they see as a friend, and someone they see who they can have a relationship with, because as they read the stories featuring that character, what they're going to see in some cases is somebody who is having their problems, and in some cases they're going to see solutions to their problems. So when they see a character who is a friend and they're struggling with what they're struggling with, that makes that character all the more appealing to them. And that's something that we're not seeing in these so-called strong heroines like your Captain Marvel. Because when I look at Captain Marvel, I looked at 2 of her comics just of the new series, I didn't see anything there that made me say, this is somebody I would want to spend time with. This is somebody I would want to be a friend to. This is somebody I would want to actually go out and feel eager about spending $2.99, $3.99, $4.99 on their next story. And that's something that many comic publishers, they're not really focused on. They're just focused on the whole strong woman argument without trying to give us a woman who is attractive to the reader. They want to go out here and, oh, thank you, DeAndre Bishop. He says that he can't wait to see one of my characters on Netflix because they're cool and down to earth. And thank you very much. I really appreciate hearing that, because that's one of the things I try to do with my characters, is make them down to earth people, regular people, and people who you would know, because when people read stories, they want to read about a friend. They want somebody who is just like the guys who are in their neighborhood or in their community, or somebody you would want to get to know. Because when I think of characters, I want to give you a character who is just like the people in your neighborhood, who um, are people that you want to hang out with, and people who you want to know, because that's what you're going to spend money on. You're going to spend money on a character who you'd like to spend time with. You're not going to spend money on somebody who's a jerk. And when I look at Captain Marvel, when I look at Kamala Khan, when I look at Unstoppable Wasp, these are not people I would spend money or spend time on. I mean, even there are darker characters like Janie Bell, Zombie Tramp, or Cassie Hack. They are more appealing than your so-called strong heroines, because at least they have some relatable traits to them. I mean, at least Cassie Hack, for being somebody who goes out and kills slashers, still is somebody who's somewhat friendly and approachable. And even Janie Bell, the Zombie Tramp, is at least friendly and approachable to a point. I mean, at least they have some traits that make them somewhat attractive, and that's their internal character traits. Because after I've read numerous issues of Hack Slash, at least Cassie Hack has some internal character traits that make you like her, and she also has that inner strength of character. She has a deep resolve that makes her endearing to the reader, because she goes through these tough challenges. And that's something, again, I put my characters through, that she goes through all of these tough challenges and she always finds a way to survive. And that's something that guys and girls want to see in a heroine. And it's a shame that, you know, these horror characters have more appealing character traits and they're than your mainstream Marvel superheroes, and they have the internal character traits readers want to see in a heroine. But the characters at Marvel and they don't want to show you that at all. They want to just tell you I'm strong, but then they don't want to show you how this character is strong. Hey Gabriel, I'm glad you tuned in, because he just came in a minute ago, and because he's one of the guys I talk to on Facebook on the regular. But what we want to see is that strong heroine who is strong on the inside. And again, Janie Bell, the Zombie Tramp, showed a lot of internal strength in the 56 issues that Dan Mendoza run, because I urge you to go check that one out if you want to see a strong heroine. That series is one of the best strong heroines in comics, but it just doesn't get the press that Captain Marvel gets or the push that it gets. But that is one really solid run, and I urge you to pick it up, along with Cassie Hack. That's another great strong heroine, very well done. And again, these characters show what I talk about regarding internal character traits, and they also show how a character can be relatable, even though they are in the darkest of dark situations. They still have appealing character traits that appeal to the reader and give the reader reasons to go out here and spend money, similar to their predecessors, like, again, Jean Grey, Psylocke, I would say Rogue and She-Hulk, and Monica Rambeau, Captain Marvel, who has been buried by Marvel in their press junkets to push this Carol Danvers. And I found that to be quite troubling, because Monica Rambeau, as I read in Amazing Spider-Man Annual 16, she was a very relatable character, and she was very much a good friend. I don't know if I have time to see Alita Battle Angel. I would love to go see it. I might just go, take a minute to go see it. But the Monica Rambeau, as I talked about in a previous video, she's been buried. But if you read her first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man Annual 16, she's a very down-to-earth person. She's a very humble person. And she's looking for help to deal with the new powers she received. And she eventually winds up becoming a friend to all the heroes in the Marvel Universe as they try to help her. And that's what builds the foundation for her relationship as she comes into the Marvel Universe. And I wish they had used Monica Rambeau as the new Captain Marvel, but I could see the racism behind Disney and even Marvel before that, because as the character was getting over at Marvel, what happened was they didn't like the idea of a black woman being the leader over Captain America. So they found a way to depower Captain Marvel. And then they took her name away when Genis came along. And then the character was turned into Photon and then eventually Spectrum. But that showed that when it came down to a black heroine, how they treat black heroines and how they buried her. Because the way they had set up Captain Marvel, she was on her way to success. Monica Rambeau, and again, in that annual, was introduced to members of the Fantastic Four. She became a trainee for the Avengers. And then eventually she became the leader of the Avengers. And she showed strength of discipline, strength of character, leadership ability, and great courage. But just as the character was starting to rise, they bury the character. And then what's really racist is instead of giving us that Captain Marvel who had that great story filled with struggle, instead what they did was go out of their way to push this Carol Danvers. And they pushed this Carol Danvers because they wanted to elevate a white woman to a high position of power. And they wanted to show that, oh, we're going to have the first woman, but it's going to be a white woman, even though the black woman, Monica Rambeau, had the more compelling story, was a richer, more multidimensional character, faced more challenges, and overcame more obstacles. But they don't want to show that heroine because these feminists who went out of their way to get this Captain Marvel movie pushed, and the people at Disney who wanted to push, they wanted to push the idea of a white feminist as the strong woman. And they wanted to do that because they wanted the strong woman to be a white woman, because whether it relates to feminists, they are female white supremacists. I would love to do that. I might have to go see this Alita Battle Angel if I can get a chance, Rapper 1000, but I'm just like really swamped right now. I just got through finishing the first draft of John Haynes' The Man with Nothing to Lose, but I'll see what I can do as related to the Alita Battle Angel, which I'm hearing is a very good story and another story of strong womanhood. But, you know, Captain Marvel, they make it like she's so strong, but the whole idea is they're pushing this white supremacist narrative where, oh, the white woman can be strong and the white woman can be elevated to this high level, but the black woman who has gone out here and did the work, like Finn on Star Wars, they have just buried her. And in the movie, instead of showing her as an equal to the white woman, they have her downplayed and into a secondary position. So it's a real insult to black women when I look at what they did to Monica Rambeau when she was just a great hero overall, and they just dropped her and degraded her, and then want to push this Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel, a woman who did not earn that name, whereas Monica Rambeau earned the name and then went out here and did the work. So when I look at this, at the way this Captain Marvel is done, they make her out to be this super duper woman, and it turns you completely off because she's being made out to be this superwoman, but she doesn't have any of the internal character that make us identify with her as some sort of so-called strong woman. It just reminds me a lot of Ocean's 8 and Ghostbusters 2016. In both of those cases, we were given these images of so-called strong women, but again, they just don't show any internal character traits that make them appealing or attractive. And the thing that I really see as really racist with Monica Rambeau is that they're supposed to be this Captain Marvel, supposed to be the heroine who's supposed to stop Thanos. And the Captain Marvel from the comics, Monica Rambeau, had more power than the other one, Carol Danvers. And the real reason why they want to make it Carol Danvers, as I see it, is they want to show, the feminists want to show this white woman beating up on this purple alien, and they want to show it as a example of so-called girl power. So that's why they pushed so hard for Carol Danvers to be Captain Marvel, because the whole idea of a black woman going out here and beating up Thanos, that's something that many white women didn't want to see, because that would mean elevating a black woman to a high position, and a high position that was equal to a white woman or even more than a white woman. And those feminists, because they are white supremacists, did not want to see that idea promoted in Avengers Endgame. So with Avengers Endgame, what they want to do is go out of their way to emasculate all of the men. Because I look at that movie, it's reminding me a lot of Last Jedi in the attempts to emasculate men. Because after watching Force Awakens and Last Jedi, the whole thing with Rey is they're pushing feminism and identity politics to show how she's this so-called strong woman. But what really turns guys off about the Last Jedi and the Force Awakens, as I saw it, was you want to push this woman as strong, but she doesn't do any of the work. And that's one of the things that really angered me watching Force Awakens and Last Jedi, was seeing this so-called strong heroine, but she does not do any of the work. I mean, the whole thing with Finn was he was a buck dancing butler, and that your I forget his name, Poe Dameron sent him to go do his dirty work. And then in the second movie, we have Finn getting completely emasculated by Rose Tico. So again, how are these characters women strong when they never have to face any adversity or hardship, but they want to tell us about how strong to an audience of men? I mean, your core audience is men, but this woman is going to talk about how strong she is, but then she doesn't want to do any of your work. She doesn't want to face any of your challenges. She doesn't want to face any of your obstacles, but she wants to talk about how strong she is, when that's something that most audiences just don't find attractive. One moment. Been talking for an hour or so. But when I looked at both of those movies, I saw another example of the so-called strong woman, and it wasn't strong at all. It wasn't what I would write as a strong woman, because when I write strong women, they have the strength of character to admit when they're wrong. Now, I remember a book I wrote in 2013 called The Thetas, where I wrote about this feminist, Colleen, who went to go challenge this, she went to pledge this sorority. And as she's doing the examination with the Thetas, she starts talking this strong, independent black woman stuff. And the senior grandmother of the Thetas hits her with a taser and tells her to get up as a strong, independent black woman. Now, when somebody's been hit with a taser, their nerves go shot. But what happened was she was so embarrassed about being told to get up as a strong, independent black woman that she was literally humbled in that scene. And she had to admit that she wasn't as strong as she thought she was, because these so-called traditional women who were a part of this sorority, they managed to get over on her, and they managed to humiliate her in that situation. And that was a situation where I was making a statement about being a strong woman, because again, it takes a strong woman to admit when she is wrong. It takes a strong woman to admit that she has made a mistake. And it takes a strong woman to admit when she needs help from other people. And when I look at, these characters that they're producing today, they aren't very strong. In fact, they are some of the weakest characters I have ever seen as heroines. And well, everybody is so desperate to push so-called strong heroines. What they're doing is showing us traits that I really believe are very detrimental for a girl to learn, because when it comes down to young girls, as I see it, they need to learn things like humility. They need to learn things like honor, and they need to learn about developing their internal character traits, because it's those internal character traits that a man is going to find attractive. Because is just like the old African proverb used to say, a race can rise no higher than the moral position of its women. What men are looking for in a woman is a woman with a strong moral position, because that woman is someone who they want to see as going to raise their children. And it's the values they learn from that woman that is important to him. So that's something that people want in a woman. That's something that guys find attractive about a woman. And that's what they want to see in comic books and fantasy. They want to see that strong woman who has that strong moral position, those strong core values, and someone who can go out of their way to admit when they're wrong or make efforts to go out here and change so that they can move their lives forward. That's what guys want to see in a woman, and that's what women want to see in a woman. They want to see that type of strength because they want a friend they can go out here and spend time with, and someone who can go out of their way to support them in whatever they're going through or help them get advice. That's what they want in a friend. They want someone who can be there for them, and that's what they want in the stories featuring heroines. They don't want this so-called strong woman who wants to attack people, and then when she gets pushback, she's talking about she's the victim. Because when it comes down to many of these feminist heroines like Captain Marvel, the minute you start fighting them back, what happens is instead of them defending themselves and understanding that, yes, you did this, what they do instead of taking responsibility is start talking about how they're being victimized. Well, that's not what a hero does. A hero is someone who owns up to whatever happens and takes responsibility for whatever happens. They don't sit there and play the victim and then hope for others to come in and save them. They don't come in here talking about, I want to take on all these guys, and then come in, oh, these guys did me dirty. But if you're a hero, you've got to learn how to take a hit. And that's all part of being a heroine. When I'm doing, I did the story Eaststeam Ascension, and even in the novel Spellbound, both Matilda and Eaststeam get beat up really bad. I mean, in Eaststeam Ascension, Eaststeam practically gets destroyed by Delilah, who's using her own powers. And it's a brutal, really brutal fight in this book. But at the end of it, Eaststeam comes back after she defeats Delilah, and that's how she earns the new powers that you're seeing on the cover. Before, she just gets beat up and destroyed in this story, and that's something people like because it shows her strength of character that she's willing to stand up and fight back. And see you later, dudes. Thus, he's going to lunch. And in Spellbound, we see Matilda, she just gets straight up destroyed in the first 2-3 chapters of the book. I mean, bullies cut up her jacket and then they curb stomp her in the bathroom. But it's her getting up from that beating and going to lunch that shows her internal strength of character, and that she has this great internal strength that makes the trait of a heroine. That's something people want to see in a heroine, is that strength of character. And that's what they want to see for a heroine, is the ability to overcome in the face of that adversity, and that you will go out here and take those beatings. You will go out here, and you can still continue persevering, because that's what a hero does. A hero doesn't play the victim, because a victim, as I've stated in numerous videos, is a powerless position. And because it's a powerless position, what happens is you have to deal with what people give you, and you have to be dictated to, but that's not a place where you can grow. Part of being a heroine is understanding that, yes, I'm going into this situation and I want to help others, but if I fall down and things happen, a lot of that is going to be on me, and I have to be able to deal with things when I fall down. And that's something I talk about in Legendary Mad Matilda, because the Matilda Crowley character, what happens is she has a rave, and then the rave gets busted and she gets arrested, and then she has to wind up trying to rebuild her life after she's arrested. And that's a major struggle for the character, who has fallen down, but she has to learn how to get back up. And that's something I also talk about in the Thetas, where I talk about, what makes a woman isn't when she falls down, it's how she gets back up when she falls. And that's not something that people put in stories featuring strong heroines. Usually with these so-called strong heroines, once they fall down, they're too embarrassed and ashamed to get back up. And that's why people just don't respect them, because they don't know how to get back up after a fall. And that's one of the key points that I put in Isis All That Glitters, the story that I'm going to adapt for the graphic novel in the Indiegogo, because in this story, Isis has a run-in with Golden Shine, and then she falls down, and then she has to try to get back up. And that's one of the things I want to put in the comic graphic novel, because that's how strong heroines are in the real world. It's the strength of character to admit that you're wrong, admit things aren't going right, and then try to take a corrective course the next time. And I want to do this as a comic so that people can see an example of a strong heroine and the story of what a strong heroine goes through. Because as I see it, we're not seeing heroines who are dealing with adversity, dealing with challenges. Instead, we get these stories that tell us that they're strong, but what's so strong about being a victim and then complaining about patriarchy that you say that you're against, but then when you get in trouble, you want that exact same patriarchy to go out here and defend you? That, to me, is a textbook example of weakness, and that's not the type of story that I would want to put in any of my books. But when I do this Isis graphic novel Indiegogo, I want to give you guys a great comic, and I want to give you a comic that features a heroine in a story and a story model that shows you what's great about being a woman and what's great about being a character, and what adversity characters go through and how they overcome adversity. Because what makes a hero, again, isn't when they fall, it's when they get back up and persevere to go take on the bad guys and try to find that way to win. That's something I want to put in this comic, and just like I put in my stories, and that's something I want to share with you guys on March 5th when I launch the Indiegogo. So when they do strong heroines these days, again, what really turns people off about so-called strong heroines is that instead of them buckling down, they come at you with this whole victim narrative. And when people start calling back and saying, "Hey, you're doing stuff," that's when these heroines start falling apart. And that's one of the things that I look at this Captain Marvel, and it's just a major turnoff for me. She's Brie Larson sitting up here talking about how this woman is so strong. And again, she's telling us that she's strong, but she's not showing us anything as related to strong. Gabriel, the script for Isis All That Glitters has been finished for a couple of months now. All I'm doing right now is just laying out the Indiegogo page and the perks, and everything that I'm doing right now is just towards building the Indiegogo. I have to record. I want to record a video for it, but everything for the Indiegogo is just about ready, except for everything is just about ready, and all I have to do is just launch it on March 5th. So we're there for the Indiegogo. But that's my goal, is to go out here and give you that type of story, because as I see it, the companies like Marvel, they're talking about strong heroines, but there's nothing strong about them, when people like Sana Amanat just don't want to admit that their ideas for a strong heroine are complete failures. And the reason why they're complete failures is because both men and women look at that heroine and they don't see anything that relates to them. And because they don't see anything that relates to them, they don't see a reason to go out here and buy their adventures. Because who would want to spend time with Kamala Khan? I've read Kamala Khan's Ms. Marvel, and she just comes across as really self-centered. And when I read Carol Danvers, she comes across as really self-centered. And what people want to see in a heroine, again, is like what I do with Isis. She's a goddess next door. She's a friend. And just like I put in all that glitters cover, she's going to stop a bank robbery because she's just what girls next door do. They try to help out. And superpowered girls next door, they try to help people out, and they try to help out in the community. That's what people want to see when with a heroine, and they don't want to see this kind of person who just wants to be a hero for the sake of their own ego and wants the accolades and praise, but then they don't want to share with the community. They don't care about the community. It's just all about them. And when I look at many of these characters, like when I was reading Unstoppable Wasp, I just sat there and I was like, this is a very obnoxious person. This is a very irritating person. Everything is all about her. Everything is about how it relates to her. The whole world is about her. And that's not a person you would want to spend time with. That's not a person you would want to spend money on. And that's not a person who you want to spend money reading their adventures. So I look at that character and I was just turned completely off by that character's self-centeredness and her narcissism. And everything was she was just so obnoxious. It was all about her making her little girl labs and how it was going to be the best thing in the world. And that's not something that people want to read about. Nobody wants to read about a hero who is all about themselves. Now, when I wrote the book, Isis, Imitation of Life, I did a whole thing about heroines and this sorority. And the whole thing I did was I wanted to show how those women wanted to serve the community. So that was something very important for me. And when I wrote Isis, Imitation of Life, I wanted to show how Isis and her Theta sorority sisters were eager to serve the Black community and how they were struggling with issues like racism and Jim Crow during the 1930s. So I wanted to show how this heroine was strong and how she was dealing with a hard time in her sorority because she was having a hard time dealing with these pledges, but she was still trying to persevere in the face of racism, Jim Crow, and the whole thing of resistance from Black people in the Black community. So that's something I wanted to explore in Imitation of Life. And again, it wasn't about them, it was about them wanting to help others. So whenever I do stories featuring heroines, it's always about them wanting to help others and putting aside their feelings and their issues to do what is right. And I remember I did the last story of the first Isis story arc. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. Don't think you can find it, but it was called Isis, All About the Goddess. And that story dealt with Isis having to help this former child star, Marilyn Marie, catch this campus stalker who had sent threatening letters to her in the college mail. Now, in order for her to stop this campus stalker, she had to go undercover as an art model and pose nude in the art studio, and she had to put aside her feelings and do what was right, and that meant having the strength of character to put aside her reservations about her own personal feelings and do what is right to make sure that this girl was not harmed by this campus stalker. And that's the type of heroine people liked, because that was one of the better selling Isis series stories, was seeing Isis not only bear all in the art studio, but her having the strength of character to put aside her feelings and reservations to do what was right and stop this campus stalker and look out for the needs of others. So that's something people want to see in a heroine, is that heroine going out of their way. I'm going to try to find this. Oh, it's over here. It's over here. But this is the book I was talking about, Isis, All About the Goddess. This is the story where Isis bared all in the art studio to stop that campus stalker. And it was one of the more popular ISIS series books. It still sells very well, and a lot of people like that story because it showed, again, that strength of internal character, and that a hero would be the lengths a hero would be willing to go to protect someone who was innocent. So when it comes down to heroines, it's about doing what is right for others. But when I look at many of these so-called SJW comics, the heroines aren't about doing what is right for others. It's just all about them and what they can get out of saving people, instead of thinking about what is the person going to get, which is keeping them safe, keeping people from suffering a great tragedy like they have experienced in their past, or dealing, helping somebody deal with the issues that they're dealing with, helping somebody deal with something that they have gone through. Like when I did Isis Imitation of Life, when she started the Thetas, Isis wanted to help people who had dealt with racism and Jim Crow try to find a new way to overcome racism and Jim Crow. Because when she went through racism and Jim Crow in the 1850s up to the 1880s, Isis wound up getting caught up in white supremacy, and she wound up getting caught in the beliefs of white supremacy. And then what happened was, as a result, the Ku Klux Klan wound up lynching her husband and murdering her son. And when she returns to America, she takes the lessons that she learned from what had happened in 1883 and creates the Thetas, the sorority, because she understands that if they have this foundation in the old African proverb of a race can rise no higher than the moral position of its women, with that foundation, she can then teach those women to set a direction for themselves and then set a direction for the race. So that's one of the reasons why I set this story in the 1930s, because these were the darkest days of Jim Crow. And during the darkest days of Jim Crow, it was those women who had that strong moral position that enabled us to get the generation that were the civil rights movement. Because if it wasn't for those people going out and having the discipline, character, and resolve to go out here in the face of white racists and white supremacists telling them that they were inferior and less than, and then going out to accomplish things like building Black-owned businesses, going out and being doctors and lawyers and showing that Black people could do, then we wouldn't have what we have today. So when I did this story, I not only wanted to pay homage to the golden age of comic books and pulp fiction, but I wanted to show my respect for all of those brothers and sisters out there who were a part of the days of Jim Crow and went out here and persevered in the face of adversity. If it wasn't for those people, we wouldn't have what we had today, because if it wasn't for those people teaching that strong moral position to the generation of the civil rights movement, we wouldn't have what we have today. So when I did this story, I wanted to show respect for those people and respect for all of the hard work and sacrifices that they put in. Thank you, I am EB Vlogs. This cover was done by Drew Swift. He's a new young artist. He was a new young brother who came out, and I was glad to work with him on this cover because it was something that I had to do last minute, because I just wanted to get this book out as part of Fantasy Flashback Fall, because as part of Fantasy Flashback Fall, I was dealing with the characters' histories and dealing with the characters' past in the SJS Direct Universe. But this was a story that meant a lot to me to do, because so many people, when it comes down to Black fantasy and science fiction, they don't really talk about the whole thing as related to our struggles during Jim Crow or talking about racism. But I wanted to talk about how we were heroes during that dark period. Now, during Jim Crow, we were heroes not because we had superpowers like Superman and Batman, but because we had the courage to go out here and just be people who, again, had that strength of character. And if it wasn't for women like the ISIS character during that time, we wouldn't have the civil rights leaders and other people we have today. So that's something I wanted to talk about because I wanted to show how we were heroes. Now, this book was a part of SJS Direct's Fantasy Flashback Fall, which was also with E-Steam, The Sands of Time. Now, in Sands of Time, I was doing a more Disney princess-esque story where we saw E-Steam before she became a demon and before she became, human again in E-Steam Ascension. But I wanted to show a story of E-Steam as before all that stuff happened and how she was a heroine even then, because what made E-Steam a heroine back then, again, was the strength of character and, again, the willingness to do what is right, even in spite of her feelings. Because in Sands of Time, E-Steam is stuck with a dilemma where she has fallen in love with John Haynes, but then she realizes that there is something more important than her feelings about John Haynes, and that is making sure that the space-time continuum remains to go on. So she has to make a tough choice regarding John Haynes and letting John Haynes go. And that's a very strong, shows how strong her character is from the internal character traits. Because whenever you're writing heroines, you want them, again, to have that great internal character, because a lot of writers, what they do is they focus one on the look of a character and the external traits. But what you want to do with a character is show those internal traits that make them relatable. Oh, that's very nice. IMED Vlogs. He says that Isis is so beautiful. He wish he could draw a wife like that cover. I'm really happy to hear that. But when I do heroines, again, I want to show those internal character traits, those internal struggles, and that's what makes them relatable. Because I look at when people write heroines for romance novels or women's fiction, they always try to find ways to make them appealing, and they have to do that, again, by making the character appealing just with the words. So they have an even greater challenge. I mean, when novelists have a great challenge because we have to make the character attractive, and you have to imagine it without a picture. Now, when it comes down to comics, you have that advantage of seeing that picture of a character. But in a novel, you have to really, that's one of the reasons why you have to focus so much on internal character traits, is because that person has to imagine this person, and they have to imagine an attractive picture of them so they have a reason to continue reading the novel and continuing to read the novel all the way up to the conclusions. Because 300 pages, 250, 300 pages is a major challenge to read, and you have to go out of your way to really give that reader a reason to keep reading. But what I see with comic books is they only have 32 pages, but they don't really have that foundation in storytelling. And it's that foundation in storytelling that's always causes these heroines to never really take off and really get the numbers as related to sales. Well, when it comes down to the way I write heroines, as I see it, I believe it works well because even as an indie publisher, I'm starting to see, the numbers come up on sales. When I remember when I did, again, E-Steam No Good Deed, which was like a 5-page story, and I put it up on Smashwords and Kindle, it immediately got 3,000 downloads. And I believe it got 3,000 downloads because the character was so relatable to the readers, and that readers liked the character and they liked the story so much that they just kept picking it up and downloading it. And that's because they liked the character, because the character had those appealing character traits. She was basically just going shopping and then comes into the story, and these robbers come in to rob the store. And after she deals with the bad guys in the store, that was what laid the foundation for the characters series. And it led to strong momentum when I did the next E-Steam story, which was Deadly Delilah. And then for Demons Anonymous, the downloads went through the roof. Good morning, Chris. Chris is another guy who follows me on Facebook. He creates the Great Omega Black manga. You should check that one out. That's one I highly recommend that you check out. But with E-Steam, she was popular from day one when I put her solo stories out. And one of the funny things about that one is that you often hear about how many comic fans would make fun of the old Lois Lane comic books from Superman. Well, I used the exact same story model from Lois Lane with a little bit of Monster High thrown in, all on the E-Steam series. And it's proven to be extremely successful for me. So it shows that there are things that people want in a heroine, in a heroine story. And yes, I do go by Sean James on Facebook, Tyler. That's what I go by. I can leave you a link to my Facebook. That's if YouTube lets me go there. That's what I go by. Yeah, that's my Facebook right there. I also go by that on Twitter as well. So you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter by going by twitter.com, Sean S. James, or you can go by Facebook. It's going good, Joshua. I'm having a very good live stream here talking about strong heroines, and I'm also talking about the Captain Marvel movie and what they're doing wrong with it. And this is really like a part 2 to the previous live stream I did last week that got disconnected abruptly. But this is continuing on it. I'm continuing to talk about strong heroines and how to write strong heroines, because I've learned a lot from the last 20 years writing heroines and developing heroines in romance novels, women's fiction, screenplays. And people like my heroines so much, they're surprised that a man could write a woman so well. But that all comes from my life experience. It comes from my personal experience. And it also comes from reading a lot of things like women's fiction and romance, because in the 90s, I read a lot of Black women's books like Waiting to Exhale, in addition to reading books like Man Child and the Promised Land. And it's reading all those books that gave me a better understanding of how to write heroines and how to tell a really solid story featuring a heroine. And one of the things that I saw that was a problem going on early as I was reading a lot of old comics like Ms. Marvel, Claws of the Cat, and many other books was, again, they just had a story model that just didn't play to the strengths of women. What they were trying to do was transpose a man's story onto a heroine, and that led to the character being very masculine instead of presenting strengths to the feminine. Now, when I started creating my story model, I started to look at things and say, if I'm going to write heroines, I need to make a heroine. The live stream is going to go till about 2 o'clock, Joshua. So you still have about 30 minutes. So if you have any questions you want to ask, you can feel free to ask them. But I wanted to play to the strengths of heroines. And I looked at things like manga. I looked at things, because manga is very successful at making heroines. And I also looked at other strong heroines like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Xena Warrior Princess. And I looked at their story models, and I began working on a story model I thought that would be a little bit better and more feature women in a more positive light without trying to make them look like men. I wanted to play to what was strong to a woman and what was attractive to men about women and women about women. And that's what I did with my story model when I started doing stories featuring heroines. Because for me, I wanted to show what made women strong to me and what made them attractive as I saw it. And then what I saw, what was attractive as related to women, was not just the visual look, but those internal character traits, which was that strength of character and that discipline and resolve. That's what made a heroine attractive to me. And but the story needed to have a really solid character transformation arc, because one of the big problems I saw as I was reading the original Ms. Marvel run, The Shadow of the She-Devil and Claws of the Cat, was, again, they kept giving these heroines these jobbers to take on, and they would go out here and easily beat the jobber. And that with those jobbers, it just showed, yes, she was a female, but it didn't give us a reason to root for her as a heroine. So when I went out here and I started writing stories featuring heroines, I would just show them getting beat up. I would show them losing. And that's one of those things that made the readers connect to my characters, was seeing these characters fall down, seeing these characters fail, seeing these characters face adversity. And that's what made those characters really attractive to the readers, because that heroine, as she falls down, and that's what makes people connect with her. And it's those rough edges that make people want to see her as somebody they want to be like, or somebody they want to have a relationship with. And that's something that I don't see in many of these stories that they try to do, like these characters like Captain Marvel or Ghostbusters 2016. They're too busy either trying to show us a masculine woman, or they're trying to play for a laugh. And that's just that. Yes, you can play for laughs, but it's how you play for laughs. Because when I came up with the E-Steam character, I put a lot of humor in her story, similar to what John Byrne did with the She-Hulk. But what makes people like the E-Steam character is that even though she suffers these humiliations, she has this devil-may-care attitude, and she just shakes off what happens to her and then manages to persevere and continue to try to face the bad guy and overcome the bad guy. So instead of her just falling apart, she continues to stand up. And I did a story, it was two stories. I did one, Little Girl Lost, where she literally gets all her clothes burned off in the middle of Times Square, and she just shakes it off. And then she goes on to take on Brimstone Jack, the demon pimp. And then she goes on, and as she's taking on Brimstone Jack, she's taking on these demon strippers, and the whole thing culminates in a very hilarious climax. But she ultimately manages to help the little girl lost find her way home, and manages to beat Brimstone Jack, the demon pimp. Now, the other E-Steam story where she faces adversity is Witches of Eastland, where the witches literally give her back her demon face when she's starting to become comfortable with her humanity and her human face. But she still manages to overcome these witches and manages to beat them by, again, having that devil-may-care attitude, and also having the confidence to be herself, even when she is stuck with this face that she's now more uncomfortable with. She still manages to still be a hero in the face of all of that adversity. So in both of those stories, we saw the E-Steam character, facing adversity and facing challenges. And that's what makes those characters attractive in a story model, because both those stories, especially Little Girl Lost, people just kept sharing that story all over when I put it on Smashwords, because they just liked that story. But whenever I do heroines, I try to give them a story model where they have to face challenges, because as it relates to the hero's journey, that's what makes characters like Luke Skywalker and Han Solo endearing, is seeing the hero go on the hero's journey. But a lot of writers, they're too afraid to put a heroine on the hero's journey. They're afraid because a lot of times guys get emotionally attached to the heroines that they create. And when they get emotionally attached, what they do is they start pulling punches with them. And those punches that they pull, again, they take the reader out of the story. And I could see that with Rey in Star Wars, where they just kept pulling punches. And I believe that Captain Marvel is a movie. I believe with Captain Mary Sue, they're going to pull a lot of punches with her. So that's something I don't do in my stories, because when I was doing the Spinsterella trilogy, I put this Matilda Crowley character, I put her through a lot. And because I put her through a lot of people, when they read the stories, they love this character, because they see that this woman is going on a heroine's journey. And as she goes on, she starts to grow, she starts to change. And with each book, she becomes a stronger woman because she has to go through those hardships. She has to admit when she's wrong. She has to admit that she has failed. And she has to admit that things are going hard for her. But then she has to admit that she has to persevere in the face of all of those failures. And that's, again, what makes the character endearing to readers. Oh, yeah, She-Hulk movie would have been great. I heard Angie Harmon wanted to do a She-Hulk movie, and that would have been a great movie because she also is a great, strong protagonist. But that's something that we're not getting with Western comics because Western comics, they're just really cowardly in a lot of cases. When it comes on developing heroines, they're too afraid to put the characters through their paces because some people, they'll sit there and say, oh, this character's, you're being a misogynist, you're being hard on women. And that's not really the case when it comes down to heroines. What you're trying to do is show how this heroine is going on the heroine's journey, because nothing I did in Spellbound, Legendary Mad Matilda, or Spinsterella would be considered misogynistic in the world of the women's fiction, young adult fiction, and romance. And I put this character through a lot. And the whole thing is, in the comic book world, those guys would have to deal with that whole misogyny argument. But in the YA and women's fiction, I never had to deal with any of that at all because I go out and I write strong women every day. Like in the Thetas, this Colleen character really gets roughed up by the Theta sisters, and even in All About Marilyn Marie gets destroyed towards the end of Act 1, and there was nothing misogynistic about it. It was all about showing how this heroine went on this journey, and it was all about showing her character transformation arc, which is something we don't get with heroines in most comics because most guys are either they get emotionally attached or they get scared, so they wind up pulling the punches. But if you're going to write a heroine, they have to go through what the guys go through if we're going to see that strength. I mean, MGTOW Light was talking about like the X-Men poster. Yeah, if Mystique is going to go in here and take on guys like Apocalypse, then yeah, she's going to get grabbed by the throat. That's just par for the course when you're taking on heroes. There was nothing misogynistic about that poster as I saw it, because if you're going to be in the same arena taking on the bad guys, then you're going to have to deal with the consequences of that. And that's one of the big problems with the heroine's journey, is that people, they want to pull punches because they're afraid of being called a misogynist. And again, there's nothing misogynistic about it. If you take on a man, then that man is going to wind up treating you in the way that he would treat another man. So if I step to a man and I get into a physical fight with another man, then I'm going to have to deal with the consequences of that. And when I'm writing heroines, I often think about that the same way. That's why I say I don't really have, when I put heroines in them, I put them in situations where they're taking on situations they can handle. That's why I never, in some cases, put women against men, although I did put E-Steam against Brimstone Jack in Little Girl Lost, where she was dealing with the demon pimp, but she managed to handle the demon pimp. She still just came in there with the devil may care attitude. She never sat there and was complaining about things. She just dealt with it because that's the way a strong heroine deals with things. They go out here and they deal with the challenges that are put in front of them, and they don't sit there and whine about it or talk about they're being victimized, because they know that if they put themselves in a situation, they have to, take responsibility for that situation. So that's what a strong heroine does in a story. But we often have times that a lot of creators, they get scared and they're afraid to put a heroine through their paces. But I'm not one of those guys. I'm not afraid to put a heroine through a rough situation, because I know that the reader is going to get something out of seeing that heroine put through that rough situation. And by seeing that character go through that rough situation, they're going to learn to see an example of what it means to be a really strong woman and what a strong woman really looks like. So that's what I try to do in my stories, is put those heroines through their paces so that people can see what that type of challenge is. And when I look at the whole misogyny argument, it's just one that I say doesn't wash, because that's what Gail Simone was trying to use when she talked about the women in refrigerators. Now, what she didn't understand about that Kyle Rayner issue that I understood was Ron Mars was trying to show that Kyle had to go through this tragedy in order to understand what it meant to be a hero, because for him, it was primarily fun and games, and he was just joking around. But this tragedy allowed him to see and understand what it meant to be a hero. So it was almost like the death of Alexander DeWitt was almost like Uncle Ben in terms of things, and it helped him grow as a character. But she took it as a whole women in refrigerators thing, and that really wasn't the case at all in terms of that story. Now, there are cases of misogyny in comics, and I know that there are, but they're very rare and few and far between. They're not, but the whole thing is that I can look at something like the death of Sue Dibney. That was misogynistic as I saw it. That one really turned me off because it was just an unnecessary death. And Identity Crisis, I always saw that as one of the most misogynistic stories out there, because it just showed a extreme contempt for the Sue Dibney character, who was a major help to the Justice League and a major friend of the Justice League. And the way they presented her death, it was just very cruel as I saw it. That was, really misogynistic as I saw it. Now, I know all about the whole thing as related to people complaining about the scantily clad costumes and, all that crazy stuff as related to comics. But that's just, as I see it, yeah, there are some costumes that I consider to be too racy. But the way you deal with it is not by using shaming language, talking about this comic is misogynistic. You just don't buy those comics, because that's how the business works. If you see something you don't like, you just don't buy it. You don't sit there and talk about this guy as misogynistic, because he has his First Amendment right to present his comic to the marketplace. But you have a right to say, if I don't want to buy that, then not buy it. That's the way I always saw it when I saw those scantily clad costumes back in the 90s, like Sue Richards' costume. Excuse me, that didn't give me a reason to go out and buy Fantastic Four. All it did was turn me off, because it was just, I saw it as completely out of character for Sue Richards, and it just didn't fit her character. So when I saw that, that was one of those things that it didn't give me a reason to go out and buy Fantastic Four. When I looked at that whole scene and that costume, it just didn't give me a reason to buy the book. So a lot of people will talk about, these scantily clad characters and all this other stuff. But again, the way you deal with that is just not by buying it. But people will talk about that. That's part of the misogyny argument. But as I see it, again, you just don't buy the books. But when it comes down to strong heroines, again, I look at the story model, and I looked at the story model, and I wanted to find ways to refine it and make it better and make the characters more appealing to both men and women. And I wanted to play to the strengths of women. And the thing that, again, I talked about in the previous live stream is that when it comes down to heroines, they have a completely different story model than men, because when it comes down to men are all about competition. And like Reed Richards and Dr. Doom wants to prove that he's a superior scientist. So he wants to beat Reed Richards that way. Whereas when you write women, their stories usually are more about things being more personal. And the reason why things are more personal is because women are primarily emotional. And because women are emotional, they don't want to beat the bad guy. They want to hurt the other person. So a victory for a woman is not beating the bad guy. It is about humiliating the woman that she does not like and making her embarrassed in a social situation or a social circle. And I talk about that again in some ISIS series books like The Beauty Myth and Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. And I think I have Wrath of the Cyber Goddess in front of me. Yeah, I do. And in ISIS Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, we see the Rahima Sanders character after being humiliated by ISIS in The Beauty Myth. She turns herself into the Cyber Goddess and goes out of her way to try to find a way to humiliate ISIS by defeating her in a social situation. And because the women are emotional, it becomes more of a personal feud. And I also talked about that in an ISIS series story called ISIS, My Sister, My Frenemy, where ISIS and Eastim are dealing with their relationship as sisters, and Delilah wants to get even with Eastim for beating her in Deadly Delilah, and she does that by humiliating her by finding out a secret regarding her past in ancient Egypt. So when it comes down to women, it's always more personal when they're going out here and they're having fights as either superheroines or in books like Spellbound, where I had Matilda Crowley taking on this bully Chantel, who was angry at Matilda because she was light-skinned. And that's all because women are different than men. Again, women, they want to hurt someone, and they want to hurt somebody on an emotional level. So they get their pleasure by seeing somebody made miserable or somebody made sad. So that's how villainesses work. Whereas heroines, they want to go out here and they don't want to go out here and save people. They want to go out here and help people. So it's a very, very different approach to fighting crime. Whereas Batman, yes, he wants to stop the criminals so that so no one else will go through the same tragedy he did when he was 8 years old. Whereas superheroines, they want to help people. Like, for example, with Wonder Woman in the movie, she wanted to help stop the war. So it all goes back to the natural role of the woman, which is the helpmeet and the support. So when it comes down to heroines, they want to help people and they want to support people and not be like the man. The man wants to protect the community, but women want to support the community. So that's where I came up with the whole goddess next door concept, because like the girl next door, she wants to help the guy next door. She wants to show how she will make a great wife to him, how she will make a great boyfriend to him, and how she can help him be a better man. And that's something people want to see when they think about heroines. They want to think about someone who help them move ahead in life, or someone who helped them move forward in things, and someone who helped them be a better person or help them move forward in a goal they wanted to accomplish. And that's something that women want to see, men and women want to see when it deals with a heroine. So that's what they want to see with a heroine. That's what they want to see. But we don't get that because a lot of these feminists, what they do is the feminists come in and they want to impose their idea of a strong woman on people. And their feminist idea of a strong woman is basically they want to show you this woman who wants to compete with them like a man. They want to be like a man. They want to act like a man. And that's not something that is appealing to audiences of men and women, because when it comes down to the whole idea of a woman who is competitive, just like I talked about in my ebook, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single, the idea of a woman who is a competitor is something that turns men off. And it also, as my family members have told me, it turns women off, because women don't like a woman who is aggressive and competitive. Yes, it's good for a woman to be assertive, but they don't want to see a woman going out here and being just like a man. They don't want to see that because, again, and when you're buying a story, you are buying a story because you want to escape a problem and you want to escape life. And it's hard to do that when you have a fantasy story where you've got this so-called strong woman, and instead of her helping me to escape a problem, she's standing there trying to be just like the hard masculine women people encounter in real life. You're sitting there in a fantasy story, and here's this super aggressive female, and she's just being just as abrasive and as disrespectful as they are in real life. So nobody's going to want to spend $15 or $5 on a comic or a novel featuring that woman, because that woman is just so mean that you don't want to spend time with her. Again, time is one of the most precious things out there. And when it comes down to time, it's something you can't get back. And when people invest time in a story, they want to invest time in a story that will allow them to, one, escape when it comes down to fantasy or comic books, and two, they want to be able to go out here and have fun. They want to be able to get a laugh. They want to be able to have some fun. They want to be able to take that break from life. And it's hard to do that when you have a character like Captain Marvel, who is just a very arrogant and obnoxious person, or a character like Kamala Khan or Nadia Pym, who is just so selfish and stuck up that you can't get away from them, because all they're doing is bringing you a problem. When you're writing fantasy heroines, you want to take people away from their problems, and you want to be able to, again, as I said in the previous live stream, give them something they can enjoy. You want to be able to give them, if you're doing an action adventure story, a fun action adventure, and in that adventure, you also want to give them some humor as well. Because one of the things I do with the ISA series, in addition to the action and adventure, I sometimes throw a joke in here or there. On the Easting books, I throw in a lot of humor in the story, but I do that because you need that humor to help you escape, because you're coming here to get away from your life for a little while, and coming here to get away from your problems for a little while. So that's something people want from their stories. You guys are talking about James Bond. Yeah. Oh, Pierce Brosnan films are pretty good. I think he in GoldenEye? Yeah, I think he was. The Dalton ones are pretty good. I'm not a fan of those the new ones, the Daniel Craig ones. They're kind of they did too much thinking, and they took the escape out of them. But you really want to have that escape part when you're writing heroines, especially when you're writing in fantasy and comics. You really want to be able to take people away from their problems for a couple of for a couple of hours or a couple of minutes, because that's why people read comic books and fantasy, is they want to get away from their life. You don't want to bring them their life. And that's what many so-called SJW comics do, is they want to bring you a problem and they want to shout at you with the problem. And that's why I think the Captain Marvel movie isn't going to do well, because I look at the numbers for the Captain Marvel movie, and it went from projected 180 million to now it's back down to double digits. And I believe the reason why it's back down to the double digits is because people, they're getting turned off, and they're primarily getting turned off because of the abrasive way your Brie Larson has been acting in the press junkets, in the media. I mean, you're telling your core audience of customers that they shouldn't watch the movie because she's going out here attacking the very same men who spent most of their money going to watch the MCU movies, buy the MCU toys, and go out here to buy the MCU merchandise. And she's doing that because she wants to try to go after women, but it's not women who are the ones who built up the MCU. It was primarily men. And I look at the merchandising, you're trying to go after the women, but you don't try to go after women that way. Now, when I go out and I market to my books like the Thetas or the Spinsterella trilogy. I could get the women by going out here and just being a very kind person, a very friendly person, and also by talking about the problem that this book will help them solve as they escape. Like for the Spinsterella trilogy for Spellbound, I talked about how the book dealt with bullies, how it dealt with the dark skin, light skin issue, and how it dealt with the whole issue of being an introvert. And it was those principles that led to the book Spellbound selling very well when I launched the book, because I took 90 days to just sit there and talk about what were some of the core points in the book, in addition to the Matilda Crowley character being a part of the goth subculture. I talked about how the book related to the reader and the experiences of the reader to give them a reason to go out here and buy it. And when I was doing the Thetas, which was an extremely successful book, I talked about sororities, and I talked about what Black sororities were like and Black culture was like. Because back then I didn't have a YouTube back then in 2013. I wasn't really using it that well for that book. I just did a lot of just giving the book away for free on Kindle. But as people read the story of the Thetas, they really got into it because I was showing them a story of this feminist character, Colleen Anderson, pledging this sorority, and then her being a humble enough woman to admit that when she was wrong, and then admit that she needed the help of the Thetas if she hoped to pledge this sorority. And as she pledged the sorority, she learned about different social skills, different social rules, unwritten social rules as related to women, because her mother had died. And in a way, the Thetas wound up giving her mother back by telling her about the various experiences they had with her mother before she passed away. So it was a story that showed the ability of women to teach and the women to share. And it also showed how this Colleen character, because she had the strength of character, was able to not only pledge the sorority, but also get a piece of her mother back at the end of the story. So the whole story was a character transformation arc where this feminist who was so against traditional women eventually learned the value of traditional women. So that was something I wanted to present in that story that we don't really get to see with books like Your Captain Marvel. We get to see. I might do another live stream talking about writing great heroes, LOM, but one of my specialties is writing strong women. So I wanted people to learn about strong women because I have a lot of writers who watch my videos and a lot of comic artists. A lot of people watch my videos. And I wanted to do this one as a bit of a teaching video, because when it comes down to the hero's journey, there are lots of books on it. But when it comes down to the heroine's journey, there isn't that much material out there. And usually, I've been working with heroines for over 20 years, and I wanted to give people my expertise regarding it, because when I look at Marvel's heroes and DC's heroines, they really don't give you that really rich multidimensional character that I usually try to present in SJS Direct books. When I go out here and I write heroines, I use a completely different platform regarding to that story. Supremo asked, how about a stream about how to spot SJW stories and how to craft one that does? I may just do that one, because when it comes down to the SJW story, they have a whole host of tells, and I can spot those tells within about 5 to 10 seconds. So that's something that I may do in a future stream, because I'm planning on doing a lot more streams in the future. But they don't really write that many books that feature talking about writing strong heroines. And I just want to give people some of the things that I learned, because I don't just write women romance. I've written romance, I've written women's fiction, and I've written serialized stories like the ISIS series and the E-Steam series. So it's something I've been doing for over the last 20 years. So I know how to write a strong heroine, but I don't see any of those traits in any of Marvel's books like Captain Marvel, and I don't see it in the Captain Marvel movie. So when I look at the Captain Marvel movie, I don't see anything there that makes you want to go out and go see it. And I don't see anything as related to the marketing that makes you want to go out and see it. Now, with Wonder Woman, I saw them do marketing right, and I saw Gal Gadot just do everything I talked about. I mean, Gal Gadot was just a great friend to people. She was very kind to people, and she literally made it look like she was having fun. If you go over to Gal Gadot's Instagram, you will see her just laughing and having a good time on this movie. And she's sitting there enjoying this movie, even though it was filled with intense and serious stuff. She made it look like something fun. And then she did nice, kind things like a little girl was sick. She went and put on a Wonder Woman costume and went over to the hospital to go visit her. And that's a very, very gracious thing to do. That's something that a woman would want to do because, again, women, they want to serve their communities. They want to help people. And she wanted to help make that little girl's day a little bit better at the hospital by visiting her as Wonder Woman. I mean, that type of behavior, that's what makes a woman attractive to people. And that's what makes people like her. And that's what also makes us respect them. So that's something that people wanted to see in a heroine. And Gal Gadot showed how she was not only a heroine by playing Wonder Woman, but how she was a heroine in real life by going out here to go visit that young girl at the hospital. I'd have to go see Alita Battle Angel, and I might have to go see it soon. So I haven't gone to see it yet because I have been so busy working on this new John Haynes story. And I finally finished the first draft of it. It's called John Haynes, The Man Who Has Nothing to Lose. So I spent most of my last month just trying to, iron the story out because I started the story in November, and I had to move in between. I was in the middle of starting this story, and I finally got back on track, and I finally managed to finish John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose. So I may go see this Alita Battle Angel sooner rather than later, just like because I'm really backed up. I still have to see Titans. I still have to see a lot of stuff, but I have been really busy. I like Ecurodox asks me, what do I think of manga? I have a great respect for manga. Manga is one of the inspirations for the ISIS series. It's one of the inspirations for my story model. What I think of the manga, I have to read that manga, Alita Battle Angel, but I have a great respect for manga because manga makes an effort to really give us strong heroines. It really gives us character transformation arcs, and it really gives us rich, multidimensional heroines. So it gives us something more of substance that we're not getting in Western media. So I'm going to have to check out this Alita Battle Angel. I'm just going to have to go and see it sooner rather than later. It's just a matter of me juggling some things in my schedule because I don't usually go to movies. I usually just wait for them to come on home video. I'm more of a cyberpunk guy because I grew up with stuff like Batman Beyond and The Matrix. That's what I came up with in the 20s, my 20s. So I'm more familiar with cyberpunk because that's something I saw a lot with Terry McGinnis. Manga artists do have ownership in their work, and that's another thing that makes their books strong because when you have something like Captain Marvel, you don't have any ownership, so they're going to try to push a narrative rather than tell a story. So as in manga, they're telling a story because the creator still has control over it. I haven't seen any anime. I have to start looking at it. I have to go start looking at stuff, but the whole thing is I have to find time because I'm so busy with this writing and editing and still trying to adjust to moving. I still haven't even finished putting up all my figures. I still have to put some I still have shelves I'm still trying to put together, but I'm still trying to do that and run the SJS direct imprint and make videos at the same time. And so, I mean, I'm working as hard as I would at a corporate job when I'm doing everything here. Um, but right now, I'm just starting to watch Incredibles 2 on Netflix, and no, I haven't read Chronicles of the Black yet. I haven't read that one yet. I might have to take a look at that soon. But I saw Winx Club though. Winx Club was very good, but the whole thing is that they messed it up, and they yeah, I like Tailspin. African American Dungeons and Dragons, that would be interesting. Dark Soul, that would be very interesting to watch. I'm gonna try to, but that would be interesting. African lore with Dungeons and Dragons, that would be something that I think would sell very well. I saw Tank Girl the movie. I haven't read any of the comics, but I did see the movie. Um, that would work. That would work a lot. That would work. Yeah, Black Dungeons and Dragons. That would work if you put some Afrocentric takes on it. It would be very interesting. Um, yeah, you could fit in the elves and you could fit in the mythology, and you could really make it work. I'm going to stay on for another maybe 10 minutes. So if anybody has any questions, you can just let me know. I'm going to get ready to wrap up the stream about 2:15 because I've been on the air for about 2 hours. Um, but I wanted to use this stream to talk about some of the things I wanted to touch on in the previous stream before I got cut off, because in the previous stream I wound up getting it got disconnected, and I wasn't able to really get as in depth with the writing of strong heroines. But in this one, I was able to really get into some of the things that are key to writing strong heroines. And I was also able to talk about what went wrong with this Captain Marvel movie, a movie that I don't see doing very well for Marvel. I think Marvel Studios is going to be on its way to having its first flop with Captain Marvel. And the reason why I believe it's on the way to its first flop is because the trailers, one, weren't very strong, and two, I just look at the way that Brie Larson is abusing the audience. I mean, she's sitting there talking about white men. She's sitting there talking bad about the audience that's supposed to spend money on her product. And she's doing this thinking that this is going to appeal to women. And you can't appeal to women if you attack the very man who's spending the money that he's going to spend to take you out to go see the movie, because she's under this feminist notion that women are going to go out here and see this movie like black people went out to see Black Panther. But Black Panther, as I see it, that was like a phenomenon that was like lightning in a bottle, that it happened once because black people wanted to see this black superhero. And this was the first big budget black superhero movie in a couple of years, because we had Blade about 20 years ago, and Blade was extremely popular. And Blade was popular because Wesley Snipes reinvented that character. But with Brie Larson, she's acting like her movie is some sort of revolutionary thing, when Wonder Woman already proved that it wasn't. And we already had superheroine movies like Elektra, which came and went. And the whole thing is that it's following a story model that is clearly one that's going to fail, because I've seen the whole story model as related to this Captain Marvel. It was used in Ghostbusters 2016. It was used in Ocean's 8. It was used in Proud Mary. It was used in Atomic Blonde. And that story model is one that turns guys off because, again, it's the one that's about competing with men. And then we have Brie Larson, who in most scenes does not act like a person we can relate to, because when it comes down to heroines, guys want to see a woman with a smile. They want to see somebody who's friendly. They want to see somebody who's approachable. And when you look at Brie Larson, she just comes across as really stiff and machine-like, and she acts more like the TX Terminatrix in Terminator 3 than she acts like a human being. And if you're going to be a heroine, again, a heroine is not somebody who is away from people and disconnected from them the way Brie Larson is. The heroine is someone who can connect with people, because in order to be somebody who is considered helpful to others, you have to be somebody that people can feel like they can be a friend. And this is something that we don't see with Brie Larson. We don't see her being a hero. We just see her, and we don't see a reason to like her or connect with her or care about her. We just see a very cold, distant person. And that's not somebody who's going to give you a reason to go out here and spend money to go watch her movie. So when I look at the character, it's just someone I wouldn't want to spend money on, or I would want to spend time with. Two intangibles that are extremely valuable to people. And Brie Larson is not a person you would want to spend money or time watching, because if you're thinking about going out on a date with a woman, this is not a woman you would want to date. This is not a woman you would want to marry. And she comes across as, again, trying to be superior over men. And when you're trying to be superior over men, that's not something that's going to be give people a reason to go out here and watch your movie. I'm going to get ready to wrap up this stream in a minute. So, again, if you have any more questions, would it work as a supervillain movie? Yeah, it would work as a supervillain movie, but then the studio wouldn't make that much money, Omio. It would just be, but it would work as a supervillain movie. It would work very well as a supervillain movie, because the way she is acting is just irritating, and the way she behaves it just turns people off. If you want to try some of the ISIS series books or the E-Steam series books, I'm going to try to leave a link to that in the stream, and you can pick up all of the ISIS and E-Steam series books on Amazon.com. They're great stories, and you can also pick up the Spinsterella trilogy books on Amazon.com as well. I thank everybody for coming to today's stream. The next live stream is going to be Friday night at 10 o'clock, and that one is going to be talking about the African-American goth subculture. I'm hoping everybody will be there for that stream, but this one is going to end in about a minute or so. So again, I thank you all for coming to the live stream, and I'm hoping that you'll pick up some of the books that I talked about in the stream, because in those books, I try to give you an example of what a strong heroine looks like. And in those books, you'll get a great model of what a strong heroine is. Again, I thank you all for coming to the stream, and I hope you're there for the next one coming this Friday.